All right, greetings and welcome, my friend, to the next and last episode here for 2024 of the Red Delta Project podcast and live stream here on the RDP YouTube channel. Of course, I'm Matt Schifferly, and today's episode is going to be a bit of an Ask Me Anything episode. I like doing these because, as you know, if you've been listening to a lot of my other previous episodes, I like to field your comments and your questions in the section here that you can just jump on the live stream here. Ask me whatever you like, and often I like to have some sort of a theme around my episodes. But today we're just going to kind of leave it a little bit open-ended because I want to make sure I can address questions you have. But if there is kind of a bit of a light theme, it's kind of what can we do to hit the ground running for a stronger 2024 or 2025, excuse me. The New Year's coming up. A lot of people I know sometimes make resolutions, although I suspect that's kind of a trend that's become a little bit less prevalent. But nonetheless, think back on what have you done in 2024? What are your successes? What are your wins? But more importantly, what are your challenges? What are some of the things that just keep hammering away at your ability to get what you want in your health and fitness career? And I am here to help you achieve that and overcome those obstacles. Because if there's one thing that I've learned over the years, it's that just continuing to beat your head against the wall and say, I just got to work harder. I just got to try harder. I just have to be more willpower towards it, usually is not a very good solution to things. If it boiled down to willpower and discipline and all that sort of thing, you'd have solved these problems by now. But instead, you have to kind of take a bit more of a different perspective of things. A former employer of mine always was excited whenever a new employee or a trainer would come to the gym and say, it's always great when you get someone new here because they just kind of look at things with a fresh pair of eyes and say, oh, no, we should have this equipment over here. Or, why are we utilizing this system? And isn't this a little redundant? Because a lot of times when you are habitually just going through the motions in your day-to-day life with diet and exercise habits, it's really easy to just become accustomed to what things are. This is the natural emotional homeostasis that we abide by whenever we have our habits. And sometimes we don't see it for being as detrimental or being open to change as much as it really is. So consider me those eyes for you on today's episode. We're going to start off right here with Eric Baker. Eric, thanks for coming on, saying, how many exercises per movement chain do you recommend in a workout? Well, you can implement quite a range there, Eric. Obviously, the minimum number is one, so you got to have at least one there. And it kind of depends on what sort of muscles you're looking for things. However, in general, I find that most people are hitting that sweet spot with two basic compound movements, and usually for upper body, this includes either a horizontal push or pull, followed by a vertical push and pull. And then for the lower body, we can address that as either a bilateral squat chain movement paired with a unilateral squat chain movement like lunges or step ups or something. But a lot of times we're also better off with an extension chain movement, which is more extension chain versus squat chain, but they pair very nicely together. So you could do something like walking lunges, for example, followed by hip bridges or kettlebell swings, deadlifts, that sort of nature. Generally, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. If you add anything else to it, you may want to include towards the end, particularly some single joint stuff, kind of as a finisher or to bring a little bit more attention to a single muscle group. Things like chest flies, bicep curls, rear delt flies, shoulder raises, that sort of thing. But generally, you're going to get most of what you want out of two exercises. But remember my general approach towards adding exercises. A lot of times people make the mistake of just adding exercises, more, kind of turning a blind eye to the fact that that's taking up exponentially greater amounts of effort out of you, and it may not be really contributing all that much better. Especially in the calisthenics world, I will assess people's programs, and it's like you've got 9 different pull-up variations here or push-up variations. And fundamentally, most of them are just doing the same thing as every other one. So you basically are doing the same thing over and over and over again, which dilutes your intensity and doesn't really produce that much of a return on the effort that you're putting in. So my rule of thumb is if you're going to add an exercise, try to make it as well, not different as possible, but very different in how you're addressing things. So, for example, if you're like, okay, I'm going to do pull-ups followed by rows. Okay, great, sure. Maybe we'll have like weighted pull-ups for a 5x5, but then when you do your rows, you're going to change up the intensity. So you can do like 10 to 15 repetitions. Maybe single arm rows, like a dumbbell row or a single arm strap row or something of that. Maybe you do your pull-ups in a very smooth slow motion, but the rows are kind of like really fast and aggressive power and stuff. Basically, whenever you add exercise, even though it's the same muscle chain or tension chain doing it, try to make it different enough so that you're creating a broader stimulus for the muscles in that chain versus just basically telling the muscles the same but different kind of ideas from one exercise to the next. So best of luck there. But yeah, start with about two, and that doesn't mean you have to do two. If you have a short period of time or low energy, one is fine. One is perfectly fine. Just make sure it's a very comprehensive exercise that covers a lot of ground, like the exercises in the new beautiful strength program that'll be coming out, things like pull-ups, dips, push-ups, squat chain movements, that sort of thing. Shamar Thomas coming on saying, Matt, hope you're doing well. Follows up with the question here. What exercise would you say has the strongest carryover to running? Oh, very good, very good question. Funny enough, I've been training quite a few triathletes lately. As an endurance athlete in my past, especially, strength training can really help those who are running and cycling, cross-country skiing and stuff. And the one thing that I found had the most carryover by far was extension chain work, particularly stuff that worked the glutes and the hamstrings, for several reasons. One is a lot of times people, especially endurance athletes, have relatively weak pull chain or extension chain work. So their glutes are under engaged, their hamstrings aren't really working that much. Lots of times people will tell me they're running and it's like all in the quads and I feel all my knees. And that's usually a sign that your extension of your hips isn't very strong. So exercises that involve a good degree of hip extension, particularly seated hip bridges, kettlebell swings, Romanian deadlifts, not just the conventional deadlifts, but Romanian deadlifts if you're looking at weights. You can also do the hamstring curls, suspension hamstring curls, have a lot of carryover. Basically, it's lighting up the entire back of the leg. And so what that does is it improves your kick, so to speak. So you're pulling your leg underneath you with more aggressive power, which is what actually makes you propel forward. A lot of times with running, I used to think this, whereas like running was all about sticking my leg out in front of me and hitting the ground with it. But it's actually, of course, that doesn't do you any good. It's when you pull your leg underneath you, which is extension of the hip. So that does a lot for that power. It also takes a lot of the work of running and puts it more in your glutes and your hamstrings, which takes a lot of the stress out of your knees in particular. So you increase your endurance and your speed and your stability when you are running, particularly handy for those who are cross-country runners and you're on things like uneven surfaces and grassy fields and running over roots in the forest and stuff. So if I were you, I would make a combination out of the what I call hamstring hell workout. And the hamstring hell workout is where you take some suspension straps, you put them about 8 to 10 inches off the floor, you lay down, you put your heels in the foot loops, and then you do 10 hamstring curls. So you lock your hips and you pull with your hamstring for knee flexion. And then right after that, you immediately bend your knees 90 degrees. So you lock your knees and then you use your hips. So you're utilizing your glutes and your hamstrings for both dynamic and isometric stability and control with that. Burns out the back of your legs in brutal fashion. By all means, adjust the repetitions to suit your level of fitness. You can put a weight in your lap if you want to do these weighted for extra resistance. But doing that a couple times a week will have substantial carryover into your running, my friend. Best of luck with your runs in 2025 and hope things go well for you. Michael Dropweight Daddy in the house. I was just having the thought, Michael, that I got to give you a call and wish you a happy holidays and happy new year, my friend. I hope things are going well. Haven't seen you or heard from you in a while, so I hope you're doing well. But how are the martial arts classes going along is what he is talking about, and they're going quite well. Martial arts, well, it's been now a year since I tested for my 6th degree black belt. My kicks and my ability to move is substantially improved over the past year. I've been doing a lot more slow kicking drills to really build up the strength in my hips, not just in the hip of the kicking leg, but also in my standing leg as well. As you've noticed as too, I've been really focusing on getting my back activated for a lot more stability in my shoulders, and that has carried over a lot into my punches. So I'm feeling lighter, stronger, and faster than ever. So thank you very much. Hope your martial arts training is going well, my friend. Some kid from Britain. It's good to see you again, my friend. Say, what is your favorite soup? Favorite soup? Well, I've always been a big fan of, I don't know if you'd really call it a soup, but I've always been a big chili fan. I like a good hearty chili with some spice to it. You throw in some cheddar cheese on top, eat it with some good bread or some tortilla chips, and that's always kind of my go-to. But I guess if you're going with a classic soup, the obvious chicken noodle works really well. I've always kind of thought more of like, needs to be more like a stew, like put a lot of stuff into it. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it off the top of my head, I've been eating a lot more chicken udon kind of soups. We've got a couple of really great Japanese restaurants here in the Denver area. One is very close to the Capra Bodyweight Training where I coach at. Very, very high quality, very traditional Japanese curries, soups, and they make a chicken udon that is just outstanding. So if you're ever in the Denver area, definitely check out Domo. Hit me up. Let's go and have lunch together. And that is a fantastic way to go about it. So once again, my friend, for those newcomers on, I am addressing questions to help you have a 2025 that is stronger than ever. What have the biggest challenges been that have been vexing you in your diet and exercise habits? What are the things that just keep popping up that slow you down and put a hitch in your get along over the past year? Let's hash it out right here, right now. Let's get to the bottom of it, and what you can do to take the brakes off of your potential and have a beautifully strong 2025. Jeffrey W. saying, what's your opinion on high frequency training? Frequency is one of those things that it's like any tool in fitness. It's like any variable. It's like intensity. It's like range of motion. You know, it's like a lot of variables where it's a tool and you need to know how to use it properly in order to achieve your fundamental training objective. Because sometimes high frequency training is bad for that sort of thing. Sometimes high frequency training is very good for that sort of thing. And like any tool, as a coach especially, if you get into a very dogmatic stance of it's always good or it's always bad, you are not doing your job, because you should look at most any approach and say, that's great in these circumstances for these types of individuals or these types of situations. And a lot of the information in our fitness culture loves to be polarizing about this sort of thing. It's like, oh, going to failure is good, going to failure is bad, eating this food is good, eating that food is bad. It's always this black and white stuff. But always remember, as I've long said, is whenever you are feeling like you have to pick sides on something, you're going to be weaker in no matter what side you pick, because strength comes from adaptability. Strength comes from your ability to selectively choose in a disciplined format when you can independently use a tool for better and avoid it when it's worse. And if you don't know how to do that, you have no business having a selection on one side or the other on a type of issue. And take that to mean things outside of fitness as well, because it's like, yes, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You need to know when and where. So frequency with training, for example, when you are going high frequency stuff, you have to use training methods that require less fatigue and exhaustion. Because the idea, of course, is you train and then you need to recover. But the thing is, you never need to recover from exercise at all. Exercise and working out requires zero recovery whatsoever. You need to recover from the stress and the exhaustion and the strain and damage of your training. And that is the important thing to recognize, because some people can run a 5K every day and the amount of stress on their body, because they're so well conditioned, is so low that they can do it every single day. And it's great. But there are some people where they run 1 mile and they're going to need like a week to recover. So it's always a case by case basis on these sorts of things. So we need to recognize that the frequency that you utilize in general, more is just going to be better. Okay, the more frequently you can train something, the faster you're going to make progress. Full stop. However, if you're doing something that is imparting more stress and fatigue into your system, then that's going to just naturally take more recovery for it, and your frequency should be going down. So don't feel like, oh, there's a proper amount of frequency or there's a certain amount of frequency that's the right thing. Yeah, generally with strength training, 2 to 3 times a week is going to be in the rough estimated ballpark much of the time. But there are certainly times where I could be like, oh, yeah, you should practice pull-ups 5, 6 times every single day because you're just trying to get used to the motion of pull-ups. So in that case, it's like, well, don't do pull-ups in a way that's exhausting you very much. And the same thing can be said the other way. It's like, well, I like to really make sure I get a good amount of stress and a good amount of fatigue in the muscles to stimulate hypertrophy. It's like, okay, blast that muscle to kingdom come. Just make sure that you're giving yourself recovery. So it's always a case-by-case basis on these sorts of things. High-frequency training is awesome. Low-frequency training is awesome. You just need to know when, where, what circumstances that is applicable. Tissue Paper is asking, what do you do for stamina and conditioning? Depends on what. Because remember that adaptation in fitness is always specific to what you're doing. So for example, like I was saying earlier, you can run a 5K and barely break a sweat and yet step into a boxing ring and have no stamina for that. It's just like strength. You can be a very powerful power lifter and yet struggle to get through a ropes course or on a climbing wall and stuff. Strength, stamina, mobility, endurance, coordination, it's all specific to what you're doing. So whenever we're looking at what are you doing for stamina, it's like, well, stamina for what? Back in the day, again, as many of you recognize, I used to be a bike racer, but there was a point where I had terrible endurance when it came to sparring in Taekwondo. So my instructor had a very simple solution. He's like, okay, here's the punching bag. You got 2 minutes. I want you to absolutely destroy yourself on that punching bag. I want you to hit as hard and as fast and as much as you can for 2 minutes. By the end of that 2 minutes, your butt had better be on the floor laying in a puddle of blood, sweat, and tears. Go. And I would do that. And after a few weeks of that, I was like, wow, my stamina in Taekwondo is much better now. Even though I could ride a mountain bike, for 30 miles and barely bat an eye before that. So it's always stamina for what? So these days, I'm doing some shadow boxing to improve my stamina in Taekwondo. I'm still doing my mountain biking. And there's a mountain out here called Lookout Mountain, which is really good for that, where it's just 30 minutes going up on a road bike. That's always fun. And as climbs go out here in Colorado, that's a pretty short climb. Going uphill consistently for a good 35 minutes is pretty quick. We've got other ones out here that are much longer, like Deer Creek Canyon, Golden Gate Canyon, which you're going uphill solid for a good 2 hours. And then, of course, you've got big 14ers like Pikes Peak, which a friend of mine and I attempted to summit this past several months. And that was going to be like 4 hours of going uphill the entire way. So would riding up Pikes Peak help me in the Taekwondo? Not at all. It wouldn't do a damn thing for me because it's too infrequent. Once again, we got our frequency, right? But it was just a fun challenge. So shadow boxing and bike riding is mostly what I do at this point. Cyril Belma, it's good to see you. If you do not have the ability to put proactive tension in the legs, is it dangerous or risky for joints to squat with the knees all the way forward? It's not dangerous or risky with the knee joint. It's just dangerous or risky when you don't have a good activation of the muscles, period. Because when you're doing any sort of activity and you're putting force through your body, your muscles are like the shock absorbers for your joints. Think of it this way. You've got a certain amount of force going through your body, like electricity going through a circuit. And that stress is going somewhere. Now, when your muscles are engaged, even a little bit, the stress goes into the muscles. And the muscles can handle that stress beautifully, very, very well. But if a muscle is having trouble engaging, then no, then you're going to be causing joint strain and stress, even with a modest amount of force. I did a video on the 24 Days of Beautiful Strength Challenge on the rule of keeping your torso and your shin in parallel to one another when you're doing lunges. And you'll feel it. If you do a lunge, you get down in a lunge position, you put your knee as far forward as you possibly can, and you keep your torso upright or even slightly lean back, you're going to feel that stress just build on your knee. And then if you lean forward, then that helps you engage your glutes a heck of a lot more, and that stress just sucks right out of the knee goes into your glutes. So activation is very important in all circumstances for keeping stress out of the joints. As I always say, if you've got joint stress somewhere during an exercise, as long as there's no damage to it, like, oh, I've got a torn meniscus or something, then it's usually a sign a muscle somewhere isn't quite doing its job, because the muscle is supposed to handle that stress, not the joints. So when you're doing an activity, you can change your body position a little bit, like that torso angle and stuff. But you do want to make sure that you're always working on keeping the muscles well engaged, warming up with some activation exercises if that's not the case. Lift to Perform coming on saying, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas too, my friend. Would you say RPE training is aligned with, well, with adaptive training? Say you do a set of bench or squat for one at an RPE, rate of perceived exertion, folks, for 6 or 10 and basic percent on the working set of the day. Absolutely, for sure. Because remember that the rate of perceived exertion is taking into account much more than just what your supposed ability is. And so we often think of physical ability as a static thing. It's kind of like in the martial arts, like, oh, you're a black belt. That means you are at this level of ability and performance. And so when someone comes to you and they're like, oh yeah, I bench press 315, that kind of gives us this gauge of how strong that person is. However, you never train the same body twice. Some days you're going to be weaker. Some days it's just going to be harder. Some days you're going to be stronger. So the RPE is just simply you being in touch with how hard does it feel that I'm doing? And then you can adjust your training accordingly. A couple of days ago, I was doing a simple workout, and even like 5 dips was really, really tough for me to do. So I'm not about to say, well, I usually do dips with a 45 or 55 pound dumbbell on a dip belt while I'm doing this, so that's what I should be doing. No, I'd be forcing myself to overexert and overload my body in a way it just was not capable of handling at that time. So when I did those 5 dips, and I was like, boy, this is really hard for me today. I'm not sure why my body is not happy with me. Of course, I adapted to that. I'm like, okay, looks like I'm doing 5x5 dips with just body weight today. And I adapted because I was listening to that RPE, to that exertion. It's like, wow, this is really hard. But on the other hand, if I'm doing dips and I'm like, well, okay, according to this table, doing dips with 55 pound dumbbell is 80% of my max strength and everything. And I'm just, for whatever reason that day, I'm like, but I am feeling really good. I'm feeling really strong. Well, yeah, let's put the 60 pounder on that sucker. Let's load this baby up, because the RPE is giving me more of a gauge of what I'm actually capable of rather than what I'm supposedly able to do. And always remember that the rule of thumb with good, effective training is you train according to your ability, not according to some formula or anything that's just kind of taking a blind guess as to what your ability is on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully you'll have your ability fairly consistent, but sometimes it will change on you, which RPE is a good way to go. Joseph Bello saying, Matt, I have some workouts I do sissy squats, but lately I've backed off them, doing them. They're bothering my left knee. Is there another exercise I could do to work legs along with lunges? Well, you've got of course, your basic squats. You can also adjust your sissy squats so that you're doing more of like a Hindu squat, which is basically a sissy squat, but your knees aren't coming too far forward or down to the floor. So you could just try those. You can also try just simply a wall sit, where you're basically doing a isometric sissy squat, where you drive your tailbone into the wall and you have your heel digging into the floor. And that's kind of like a sissy squat, especially if you're really deep on the wall sit, you can do that. But look at those glutes, my friend. Make sure your glutes, calves, and hamstrings are on if you've got any of that stress in the knee. But I think I would go with the wall sit, the isometric wall sit for now. And hopefully that will help to build up some of the tension in your quads without straining out your knee. David Vincentini, excuse me, coming on saying, is there any type of overhead press, shoulder press need for big shoulders, or a lateral raise is enough? Honestly, David, I'm not a big fan of lateral raises in general. I know they're one of those things that are a hold off from the bodybuilder era. I used to do them like crazy. They can be good. A lot of times guys will be like, oh, you got to work that lateral head. I've never once ever heard of a single instance or seen someone who has a really developed anterior head and posterior deltoid, and their lateral deltoid is just totally underdeveloped. There's no one walking around with a valley in the middle of their shoulder from a lack of lateral head development. So in general, I really don't think the lateral raises and front raises and stuff really do all that much for the shoulders. They're really hard to load with an adequate amount of weight, even though they don't take a whole lot for that sort of thing. But the general consensus is that the big compounding overhead pike push-ups, handstand push-ups, overhead presses and stuff are still where you're going to get the bulk of your shoulder development from it. And so the bottom line is I don't think lateral raises are enough in most cases. They're kind of a finisher for the shoulders and stuff. But yeah, I would be interested to see if there was any literature out there comparing the two. But if just anecdotally in my experience and everything, I would say that the lateral raise is a far distant cry from an effective shoulder exercise. Even though I know it's, you do it and you're like, wow, my shoulders are really working. It's like, yeah, but just because you feel like something's really hard doesn't necessarily mean it's effective. So I would say stick with the overhead press if you can. I don't know if you've got like a shoulder injury or anything like that. That's kind of making that tough, but that's your bread and butter shoulder exercise for sure. Preferably something with a little bit of rotation if you can get it too. VEZOC. Love the thumbnail though there, man. Those Pagani's are gorgeous. So, hi, I do quite a lot of road gravel cycling. That's hardcore, very nice. Would it be optimal to still train calves daily? Maybe 1 or 2 days of rest a week. Would it be better? Not sure. I like your calf workout videos. Thank you very much. I would say for now, like a lot of times I see this where folks will not be doing an exercise or training something very much. And they're like, I'm going to do it every day. Coming back to our frequency training, lots of times when people jump into high frequency training, even if it works, they're getting a result. It's like, yeah, you're getting this result doing this every single day, but you could possibly get the same result literally doing it twice a week. So here's what I would recommend there, VEZOC, is try doing calf training, calf raises, getting big, good, solid range of motion twice a week. See if that gives you much of a result, especially if you're doing that type of gravel and road and style training stuff. We don't want you to get on the bike and just feel like you've got no power. Especially when you're on the gravel, because that takes a little bit more power than cycling on the road. When you're going uphill, it's a little bit of a different story. But basically, I would say go with twice a week, something that would give you a day, maybe to let it recover a little bit before your next ride or after a ride or something, and see what that does for you. Then you can add in 3 to 4 times a week and go from there. I'm assuming you're not doing it now, though. Maybe you are already there. Cristobal saying, hey, Matt, what is your favorite bicep curl variation? Do you prefer to focus on the arm training as a finisher, or you put them at the beginning of your training sessions? Well, it kind of depends on what I'm going for. I mean, sometimes I'll just do a set of bicep curls just to get a nice satisfying pump. But usually it's a finisher at the end, more just to get that satisfaction. I don't really believe that bicep curls are doing a whole lot for my biceps once I've really blasted them with effective pull-ups and rows, but they do feel really good. And it's funny you mentioned this, because just today I was doing a little bit of some curls and I was re-experimenting with doing the suspension bicep curls with the anchor points wider than my shoulder width. A lot of times people will do this, especially if you're using a single anchor point device like a TRX or something. You've got a narrow anchor point, which is okay, but that tends to bring a little bit of this inverted V type of formation, which is fine. It works okay. Shoulder width, when your hands are the same width as your elbow. But when you use anchor points that are just a little bit wider than shoulder width, you have this really satisfying, I'm not sure I can really demonstrate it here on the video, but you're pulling your hands towards your shoulders, but also in at the same time. And the straps, because they're wider, are fighting that inward motion. And it just gives this oh so delicious angle of resistance to things, especially if your shoulders are really packed, your back is engaged, everything is very stable, and it just goes right into your biceps in such a focused way. It's kind of like akin also to the lateral bicep curls, where you're on the angle here and you're curling yourself up. That's also very, very effective for just dialing it into the biceps. So I would say those two exercises are my favorite bicep exercises. Zaid, it's good to see you as always. Matt recently checked in a pharmacy, had a 28.9% body fat on fasting. I'm able to do pull-ups for reps, progressing my front lever, having a hang of close to a minute. Should I be concerned? Concerned with what? The body fat percentage? I mean, it's going to be with what it is there, my friend. I mean, obviously, close to 30% is a good amount of body fat on anybody. So I would say if you want to lose body fat, you certainly have enough that you should be able to do so. It's not such a low level where it's like, because it gets harder as you get lower. And it's like, I don't know, it's going to be hard to keep getting leaner. Sometimes I'll have clients who have like single digit body fat, like 7%, 8% body fat. And they're like, I need to get leaner. And I'm like, good luck with that kind of thing. And we all genetically carry more or less body fat to some degree. But even at that level, it's like, I don't really know if that's going to be worth it. I mean, not even so much possible, but the lower you go, the higher the price. So I would say get blood work checked and things of that nature, blood pressure, cholesterol, things of that nature. If you're concerned about health issues, is the golden rule of science is measure the thing that you're concerned with. Don't just go off of a correlation like, okay, body fat levels are high. Is that bad or good or something? It's like, well, if you're concerned about your health, measure things more about your health. But I would say if you want to lose body fat for aesthetics, just to feel better and stuff, you could probably easily get down to the 20% in 2025. And that may do quite a bit for your performance, but also just helping you feel better. But the question is really, are you concerned? Your ability to push yourself and take changes has nothing to do with my level of concern. It's your level of concern. So are you concerned, my friend? And I would say maybe not so much concerned, but maybe that is a bit of a wake-up call that shows your potential to hopefully get leaner. She'll be gone. It's good to see you again. I haven't seen your name in a while. Saying, maybe push-pull squat. What about abs and core? When to do those. So one of the things with push, pull, and squat is that you're already getting abs and core, depending on your exercise selection, to some degree. It's that old adage of lots of times you would run into particularly like power lifters and stuff. They're like, I never work my abs, never work my core because the push up or the bench press, squats, and deadlift take care of it already, which I wouldn't go that far. It's maybe to some degree. And then I once knew a power lifter who's like, I don't need to train my abs. The squat gets it all and fine. And then we had an ab machine and he's like, oh, I'm going to be awesome at this. And on the lightest weight, he did like 5 ab crunches and his abs seized on him. And it's like, yep, your abs are weak, dude. They're weak for that machine at least. But bottom line is if you're doing push-ups, a push-up variation, a row variation, and your hips and stuff, then your core's working to some degree. Automatically. Pull-ups work your abs to some degree and stuff. And if you want to add stuff in, supplemental, just put in another day where you're doing some of the core work or put in at the end of your workout, maybe even as a bit of a warm-up. Just honestly, it doesn't matter where you put it. Just put it in somewhere. Just add it however you see fit. That's usually the approach that I take with someone is don't feel like you need to treat your core, your midsection, your abs as like this big, huge muscle group that requires a whole workout in itself and stuff. You could do that. That's fine. But for the most part, just pepper it in how you like. I was like, I'm just going to hang from this bar and get some leg raises while I'm warming up for pull-ups. Yeah, sure. Great. I'm going to do these ab rollouts as a finisher for my lats after my pull chain day. It's like, sure, whatever. I don't think you can really go wrong doing it wherever you like. If there's going to be some interference effect, like, oh man, if I do hanging leg raises, then my grip is shot for pull-ups and stuff, then you'll get feedback, but that's going to be more specific to you yourself rather than something of a general recommendation. Joseph Bell is saying, have they ever tried using weight with isometrics? So yeah, that's often what I call the hybrid isometrics, where a yielding isometric is entirely with weight. You have a live load, like if I'm holding a weight out to the side, the resistance is from that weight, even if it's just the weight of my arm. Then you've got the overcoming isometric style, where you're pushing or pulling against an immovable object, which is usually the isometrics that I'm utilizing. But you can do both, where you have a weight and then you employ pushing or pulling that weight against an immovable thing. I've got some videos out there, good luck finding it, but one of the things that I've done in the past is I would string a strap or some sort of a chain or something anchored down underneath the machine, and then jump up on a pull-up bar that would I would pull myself about halfway up before I got to the length of the strap, and then I would basically pull against the strap. So that's weight of my body weight pulling against the extra resistance of pulling against the strap. Works extremely well for building up a lot of strength and resiliency and that sort of thing. And it's a good way to go. So I highly recommend playing around with that stuff. That's what the isometric rack for York barbell was all about. You'd have a barbell and you'd lift the barbell and then you'd push it up against the pins in the rack, and very effective. Drop Weight Daddy saying my body fat was 40% 2012, then 8% body fat in 2016. I am 19. I feel my best, if that helps. Yeah, you're gonna find there's a line in the sand for your body fat percentage where you're going to look and feel your best. A lot of times when it comes to body fat, people will be like, less is always better. Better, 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 lower, 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 lower. And that's not true at all, because as you get lower, that's going to take more work to maintain that. So it's going to be more stress on body, mind, and lifestyle. It's also going to be just harder on your body as a whole. Lots of times when I was really lean, cycling and stuff, I noticed that once I got around 8% body fat or stuff, I was just much more susceptible to injury and colds. I just couldn't recover very well from my workouts. So I would go and do like a long ride, and it would just be like a couple days afterwards. I'm like, gosh, I'm just not recovering from this sort of thing. And it's not necessarily your percentage of body fat that's doing it, although that certainly plays a role. It's more just the habits you have for maintaining that. So when I was that lean, I wasn't eating very much. I had a really restrictive diet. I wasn't allowing myself higher calorie foods and stuff. So I would go out on these 80, 100-mile bike rides and then come home and eat a turkey sandwich, plain. No mayo, no cheese, white bread, that sort of thing. And it's like, well, no wonder it took me days to recover. Like I was barely feeding myself. So I got really lean, but it certainly was not the way to go for that sort of thing. And you'll find you just are going to feel your best and perform your best at a certain body fat percentage. Generally with guys, I notice it's about maybe, lower teens, 12, 13, 14%. Michael's chiming in with 19%, so you got to kind of experiment and see what works best for you. There was one here. I don't want to miss it. Where was it? Sorry if I miss anybody here. I'm trying to get it, but of course these things scroll through. But keep calm. Let me help you. Saying, Matt, can you build muscle on a low protein diet, 60 grams per day? Well, I don't know if 60 grams is necessarily all that low, but it depends on so many other factors. It depends on physical activity, depends on your body size. Like if you're 6'5", 60 grams of protein is a hell of a lot lower than if you're 5'7", just because you need more protein because you have more body and fat-free mass to take care of and stuff. The question I would ask is, why are you trying to be low? Is it a medical thing? Is it something that you need to do? Generally, whenever people try to build muscle when they're low protein, it's harder to do, bottom line. Is it possible? Maybe. There's no straight line where it's like, oh, once you go below this level, it's impossible to do. Again, it depends on many different factors, but it's also one of those things that can still happen. It's just harder or slower. It's kind of like the whole, can you build muscle in a caloric deficit? Stronger by Science did a number of research articles on this where they had people in a caloric deficit, and the greater the deficit was, the less muscle they built until eventually they got to a point where they weren't building muscle. And the point on that article that a lot of people missed was, but you can still build on a caloric deficit. Someone was in a 300 caloric a day deficit and they still were building muscle. It was slower, it was harder, but they were still doing it. And it's the same thing with protein intake in general. When you're lower on protein intake, it's just going to be harder, to the point where it may feel like it's impossible, but it could still be possible. However, if you can bring that number up, and you might, again, just feel better from it. You might feel like you recover a lot better. Sarah saying, hey, Matt, I train 3 times per week. Everything is more convenient. I just want to know if I'm overtraining with arms. I use dumbbells for traditional standing curls, hammer and concentration curls 4 times 12. Is it too much? Yeah, you may have a lot of redundancy going on here. So I would say just 1 curl variation. So each time you're working out, just pick one. The standing curls, concentration curls, hammer curls, that sort of thing. A lot of people find they get rid of curls entirely, doesn't affect them whatsoever. So it could very well be the case where you're just doing a lot of work for not really any extra benefit. It's fun. Like a lot of times when people have different curls, they're utilizing what I call the flavor of the exercise. Earlier, I was talking about my favorite bicep curl variations, where it's like, I like doing it with the wide angle now and stuff. Feels great. But if I'm in a situation where it's like, oh, all I got is a TRX, I can't go wide, big deal. Yeah. Is it going to feel a little different? Is it going to be, yeah, does it matter? Not really, no. So don't worry too much about it. So I would say generally, especially with single joint exercises, if you've got more than one variation in a workout, you're probably getting a lot of redundancy and just doing a lot of needless work. So each workout, I would just pick a different curl. Hammer curls, concentration curls, standing curls and stuff, because how many different ways do you need to bend your elbow, really? So I would just pick one per workout and get as many sets as you can until your biceps are feeling nice and toasty. DKK, thank you very much for the tip, Karsten. It's very much appreciated. Have a very happy new year, my friend. Thank you so very much. GP training, same. What do you think of high volume calisthenics, like doing 400 push-ups with a deck of cards and so forth? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of high volume stuff. I know we talked about high frequency earlier and stuff, but volume and intensity are always on that seesaw of things. And whenever I see high volume stuff, I'm like, well, why don't you just make it harder? Like people ask me, can you do 100 push-ups? I'm like, why would I want to do push-ups that are that easy? A variation that's that easy. It'd be like going into a big iron pit bodybuilder power lifter mecca and some guy gets a boom like single for 900-pound deadlift, and like, you could do a lot more reps if you just didn't have as much weight on the bar. Think about it. And of course I'd be kicked out probably within an inch of my life if I suggested such a thing. They'd be like, who is this idiot? What is he doing? But it's just recognizing that simple dichotomy between volume and intensity. In general, the research, the science, the anecdotal evidence I've come across is that most of the time, people are just better off with intensity, with more intensity rather than less. When you're training for strength, when you're training with resistance, good amounts of resistance, then you're just going to get better results. Flat out. You're going to build more muscle. You're going to have better strength. You're going to build more coordination. The higher volume stuff is great if your goal is volume specific. Like you've got to be able to do 300 push-ups in order to make it through a boot camp or something like that. But for the most part, I'm not a fan of volume stuff. It's just a lot of work. It's not that fruitful. It typically lends itself to poor technique because your goal is not to do good exercise with volume. Your goal is just to do 400 push-ups. Your goal is not to build muscle or strength. Your goal is not to push yourself. Your goal is to just get a certain amount of work done. And there's a big risk that comes from fitness and life in general, where you're not trying to be successful, you're just trying to work hard. And that's when we get into trouble a lot of times. And we're just taxing our body, mind, and lifestyle as much as we can, crossing our fingers and hoping we're just going to get what we want through sheer luck. And I don't like that. It's fun challenges. Sure, it's a challenge. It's great. It's a good challenge. Sometimes it's fun to do. You're bored with your friends on vacation. Hey, let's do the push-ups through a deck of cards thing. Oh yeah, that'd be great kind of thing. But it's not something I usually recommend as a normal approach to training. It's usually something more along the lines of like, hey, wouldn't this be a quirky thing to do? Kind of a fun thing to do it for ourselves. It's kind of a similar reason why I don't do long bike rides anymore. Last time I did a really long bike ride was from Copper to Vail here in Colorado. It took me about 11 hours to do that. And after about hour 3, I was like, what the hell am I doing out here? This is stupid. Like, I love mountain biking, but I've already got what I want out of my mountain bike ride at this point. I'm still got so much more to go, and why? Like, I've got better things to do with my Saturday than just endlessly ride. And it's like, but it's a challenge. It's gonna, fortitude and all that. And it's like, yeah, big deal. I was riding up Pikes Peak with my buddy, and it was just one of those like, hey, let's try this as a quirky thing. But it's certainly not something I'm going to make as a plan in my fitness career. That's for darn sure. Oh, here we go. Joe Rockheads, thoughts on super slow. So like frequency, speed is a tool. And there are definitely times when going slower is a lot better. There are times when going a lot faster is a lot better. So you could flip that around and say sometimes going super slow is really bad. Sometimes going fast is really bad. It's just knowing on what it is. So super slow is a good way to just kind of dial in technique and spend more time in particular at the more difficult points in an exercise. So resistance increases through a dynamic range. So when you are, for example, getting down closer to the bottom of a push-up, the resistance on your muscles increases. So when people are doing them slower, they're just spending more time down there per repetition. In the overall scheme of things, it may not really matter one way or the other because it's just time and tension, regardless of speed. If you're burning out your muscular work capacity to stimulate hypertrophy, you're going to build roughly the same amount of muscle or stimulate the building of muscle, regardless of what your speed is, as long as you're still achieving that muscular work capacity. But slow helps with coordination. It helps with control. It helps with being able to kind of dial in technique a little bit. When you're, for example, doing dips and, oh, my shoulders keep popping up. Well, maybe you're losing some of the tension control. Maybe you're bouncing out of it, and that's causing you to lose it a little bit. Having that slow down can potentially increase your control. But generally, for individuals, if you're looking for a new way to spark some new life in your training, do the opposite of whatever you've been doing for speed. So if you're normally a slow and steady or super slow kind of training, try doing that exercise at a faster tempo. If you're usually going and just banging out push-ups like a crazy, then start going slower. This is one of the common things that happens a lot in fitness, where people will flip the switch to the other form of training that they've been doing, and they make progress just because they're covering ground they haven't covered before. And they're like, oh, wow, this is the way to do it. And then they become zealots for super slow training, high frequency training, super fast training, high intensity training, whatever, right? They think, oh, that's the answer. No, it's not better. It's just covering ground you haven't been addressing in the past. So it feels like it's better, but you're really not getting anything that much better out of it compared to what you were doing. It's just kind of different. It's the new shiny toy kind of approach. ID is saying, hey, Matt, my right foot wants to turn to the right when doing squats. My right leg feels weaker and less stable. Why is that, and can I fix it? Yes, you can fix it, ID. Absolutely. And believe it or not, it's not your foot, or it's probably not your foot. 9 times out of 10, these sorts of things are more medial rather than distal. So it's in your hips. Watch yourself in the mirror. If you can, find a mirror that's got a seam in it, a vertical seam, and squat So that seam is going right down your center line. And watch your hips. I would bet dollars to donuts your hips are shifting or twisting in some way as you go down. And that movement is then traveling down your leg. And that's why you're noticing the foot is turning. Because I had much the same issue myself. So a couple ways you can fix this. One is just notice it, see if you can see it, and then simply try not to do it. Two is employ more unilateral training. That's very much the case here, of course, in the calisthenics world. So lunges, split squats, hover lunges, step ups, that sort of thing, because you're going to notice that, again, watch yourself, videotape yourself, your hips are going to be moving around back and forth. And it sounds simple enough, but a lot of times the answer really is, well, don't do that. It's like, well, when I squat down, my hips shift to the left. Well, don't shift to your left. Just try to keep it to the right. Probably going to need to decrease your resistance in order to make that happen. Because remember, when we add intensity or resistance to an exercise, we reinforce whatever habits we have. So if you're used to squatting down, shifting to your left, which I'm betting is happening with your hips, and your foot is rotating, you're reinforcing that pattern so it becomes more strongly ingrained in your nervous system. So you're probably going to need to reduce any external load that you have on yourself. Maybe even hold on to something like a suspension straps or a bar or something, so that way you can kind of control your body weight distribution. And also deploy some shifting squats too. I cover shift squats in many videos. Just look up shift squats or shifting squats on the YouTube channel, and you'll find lots, because that does a lot of good for just kind of weeding out stiffness, weakness, and tightness that tends to hide in the hips. Juan Fernandez saying, thoughts on using only push-up variations for chest, specifically due to shoulder issues. Which variations do you recommend? Very well. I'm not a big fan of the ideas of, people like, oh, this push-up variation works the chest more. This pull-up variation works the biceps more and stuff. No, your chest should be lighting up like a Christmas tree on any push-up variation you do. And remember that muscle engagement is your responsibility when you're doing an exercise. So the exercise is not for the technique is not responsible. If you do an exercise and you're like, whoa, my chest is really lit up, don't think, wow, that's working my chest better. Think instead, it's like, well, why isn't my chest working like that on the other push-up variations? Because you're doing something different to do that variation. What are you doing different? And then apply that to all of the other things. But you've got a much more important thing to deal with here, because you're talking about shoulder issues. Now, I would say that you're probably utilizing something where you don't have the most stability in your shoulders, assuming, I don't know what's going on with your shoulders. Maybe you've got an injury, torn labrum or rotator cuff or something like that. I'm just speculating here. But I would say whenever people talk to me about push-ups and they have shoulder issues, I know because that happened to me for many years myself, there's something wrong with the scapular stability. You're not using your back enough. Usually when people have poor scapular stability and poor utilization of the back, that also transfers to poor engagement and utilization in the chest. So when your back gets more engaged and your shoulders become more stable, pulling the shoulders down, particularly in the bottom of push-up position, not only does that help the stress go into the chest more, but takes stress out of the shoulders. Remember, when there's stress in a joint, that means a muscle somewhere isn't doing its job. So I'm speculating here, but I would bet that's probably what's going on. So I would take a look at push-up variations that particularly just drive the shoulders down quite a bit. RTO push-ups on rings are very helpful for that. For years, I would do RTO push-ups, and I'm like, gosh, why is this like blasting the hell out of my chest? And it's like, well, because when you're rotating that much with the rings at the bottom, the shoulders are packed. It's like, oh, well, so then I just started getting my shoulders more packed with everything. It's like, well, now I'm blasting my chest more with all push-ups. So that might be what's going on, but again, speculating. Shelby saying, Matt, do one needs to eat maintenance calories through the year? When to eat a surplus, when should you eat in deficit? Some general rules. Well, it depends on what you're trying to go for, my friend. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to gain weight throughout the year? You may find that your habits are more conducive towards one or the other. A lot of times people find that it's just easier to eat more during like the winter months if you live in a very seasonal area, and more conducive for weight loss during the summer months. But kind of depends on where you are at. That's why, like, I'm always saying, like, eat to satisfy. The objective of a healthy diet is to satisfy your appetite. So if you're trying to build muscle, so you're training and you're recovering well, your appetite will naturally increase so that you're eating more to accommodate that to happen. But there's a lot of other things in life that need to happen in order for that to be able to create that kind of stimulus. You're not going to build muscle just because you force feed yourself. You know, if you're force feeding yourself an extra 1,000 calories a day, but your training is crap, your sleep is crap, you're stressed out to the nines, your body's going to be like, okay, 1,000 extra calories. Did you want me to do anything with this? Because you're not telling me to build anything right now. So generally, you know, listen to your body first and foremost. A lot of people, the biggest challenge that comes with them is they're trying to eat according to a plan. They're trying to eat according to a program or a diet or something. And they're never stopping and just saying, well, what do I just need? What does my body need? What do I feel like eating? How much food do I feel like I need in order to satisfy myself, in order to recover well? And that's naturally going to ebb and flow and change over time. And by and large, the people who just have an easier time building muscle, maintaining weight, losing weight, are starting off with that mentality. They're not counting calories. They're not following any kind of diet. They're like, yeah, you know, I've been hitting the gym harder. I've been really crushing it, and I can eat a bread truck every day now. You know, my body's just starving. Well, good, eat, feed it. You're not trying to be like, should I be in a caloric surplus or anything like that? It's just like, I'm hungrier, I'm going to eat more kind of idea. And that's usually much more a healthy and holistic way to go, because I know a lot of times we think that we can stimulate a change through diet. But a lot of times that stimulus that we're looking for is coming from our physical activity. Diet is more of just the supplying of the nutrients and the materials our body needs. But the actual changes we want are coming from physical activity, particularly when it comes to getting stronger, building muscle, and that sort of thing. The diet is much, much secondary. So I would say, don't worry about being a deficit or a surplus or anything like that. I would say just focus on, should I eat more or less for what my body is asking for right now? Micaiah, it's good to see you, my friend. How do you feel about mobility, flow, and primal movements? Love them. Employ them all the time with clients. It's one of the biggest advantages of calisthenics is we can apply resistance against our joints in multiple directions rather than just robotic up, down, sagittal plane kind of stuff. So I think they're fantastic. They're great for warm-ups. They're great for loosening up. I'll sometimes get some of those movements if I've been sitting a lot, you know, on a plane or something like that. I have several that I employ with clients every single time as part of the warm-up, just to make sure that things are kind of working and engaged. So definitely a good bang for the buck type of activity. Next, coming on in saying, Matt, what's the secret to strength? Is it long time or rest between sets, or a few reps on high frequency, low volume? Love to hear your wisdom and so on. No secret, my friend. No secret. You want to get stronger? You have to train your strength. You have to train in a way that gets your muscles to contract harder. That's all it is just making the muscles contract harder. That's your fundamental objective. So this is why it's important, folks, to understand what your fundamental objectives are. Because if you don't know what your objective is, you're always just going to be piecemealing your approaches and just hunting and pecking and hoping you get success through blind luck. Because it's like, well, what if I did high frequency? What if I did longer rest? What if I did shorter rest and all stuff? If you don't know what your objective is, every decision you ever make is a random guess or an estimated guess at best. You're always blind to what's going to be effective for you if you don't know what your objective is. Once you know your objective, everything's easy to understand. So we have our objective. We want to contract our muscles really, really hard. Okay, so will longer rest periods help you do that? We could speculate, sure. Because if you do a workout set, and then, let me give you another example. Let's say you're doing some sort of like a circuit training, Metcon, Orange Theory kind of thing, and you just get off the treadmill and you're huffing and puffing, and it's, okay, here we go, and I'm gonna lift this heavy weight, and it's like, oh, and it's like, I'm so tired, dude. how much tension can you generate in your muscles when you're tired? Not much, right? So is that going to help you? No. If you rest more, give yourself more recovery, it's like, yeah, and then I can go in and crush it and I can contract my muscles a hell of a lot harder. Does that help you get stronger? Obviously, yes. Well, then there's your answer, kind of thing. So that's your objective. You're trying to just contract your muscles extremely hard in order to get stronger. That's the objective. Do whatever you can and whatever you need to do in your workout training variables to make that happen. And bear in mind that sometimes you're going to have things that just work better for you. You could be in a gym and someone's like, squats are the absolute best exercise for building stronger quads. And you're doing squats for 6 months and you're like, I have trouble making my legs work that hard with this exercise. It feels awkward, unstable. My body doesn't like it very much. I get out of breath so quickly. I'm nervous about the bar on my back and being able to rack it and stuff. But then you go and you do like step ups or lunges or some other exercise. You're like, whoa, holy smokes. I can really, really work my muscles so much harder with this exercise. There's your answer. Doesn't matter what the science says. I got the research that says this. Doesn't matter. When you do something, you're like, holy smokes, this is helping me achieve my objectives so much better. It's better, full stop. That's why when I got into calisthenics, I started to get far better results. And I was always that guy who was like, oh no, you can't get strong with calisthenics. You can't build muscle with calisthenics. And yet here I am going like, I can push my muscles so much harder with calisthenics than I could with a heavy bar on my back for whatever personal reasons I had. Well, there's your answer. Always go after the objective. Your objective to get stronger, create more tension in the muscle progressively over time, of course. Whatever variables you can manipulate and enhance for your ability to do that better, that's going to help you build it, my friend. So be aware of that. Make your own calls and getting things straight about it. Following up, so strength about squeezing and hypertrophy about muscle stimulation. No, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So contracting the muscle hard. Like I've got, my isometrics here. I got the iso chain. If I'm just like, that's strength training. Anything that involves a high degree of tension in the muscle is strength. That's what strength is. How much tension are you creating in the muscle? The stimulus for hypertrophy, that objective is working your muscular work capacity. That's challenging a number of different ways, as I addressed in a video last week on the RDP channel. But that's basically challenged the muscular ability to contract, period, to a high degree of fatigue. And that's hypertrophy. It's not working out a certain way. It's not using particular exercises and stuff like we were talking about with speed. It's like, is training faster or slower going to be better for this sort of thing? A lot of times a single variable is not really going to matter all that much as long as it's having the same basic influence on that objective. Jordan Decker saying, Matt, good to see you. What are these go-to flow type movements that you use to loosen up? Oh, it's kind of hard to describe here, but these are largely movements that I learned a long time ago from my original Taekwondo instructor. But they're the sort of thing you can also just Google. Actually, let me backtrack a little bit. Check out Gold Medal Body Fitness, their Elements program, gmbfitness.co, I think. It might be .io. Memory serves me. Check out their Elements program. That's what we're looking at. The bear, frog, the monkey, those are type of movements that I utilize on a regular basis. I picked up the Elements program years ago, one of the best programs I ever invested in on that sort of thing, because you're just not going to be able to train your body in that way with conventional up, down, pick it up, put it down kind of strength training. And it's a great way to supplement your calisthenics training. Micah saying, does taking shorter rest breaks and no rest help in any way to burn calories, lose weight, gain strength, anything? Well, again, you're training that which you challenge. So you're challenging your endurance, your stamina. So it makes you more endurance wise. It gives you better stamina for what you're doing. That's it. That's all you're getting out of it. It's a lot of times, when we're circuit training stuff, it can be a good way to be more efficient. It's like, oh, I did all these exercises in like 20 seconds. That's great, kind of thing. But no, a lot of times, the reason why a lot of the like the Metcons and things like that are really popular is, yeah, good way to get cardio up and improve that cardiovascular stamina on that sort of thing, because of course that's what you're challenging. But a lot of times I think people are drawn to these sorts of things just because they get their ass kicked. And it's like, oh man, that's so much harder. It's like, so remember, we don't want to just blindly go into a program thinking, wow, it's really, really hard. That means it's effective at something, right? Not necessarily. A lot of times it can be very detrimental. Remember, the number one reason why people fail to achieve the results they want is they're working too hard. Is because they're wasting a lot of time and energy, so they just don't have much left over for what's actually productive and conducive. I go over that sort of thing a lot more in training objectives and stuff in my book, Micro Workouts. Shameless plug, the link down below will get you to reddeltaproject.com, where all my books are there. But the micro workouts whole idea is, well, when you know what your training objective is, you go more directly after what you actually want, and you don't waste nearly as much time and energy on things that aren't really that conducive, which is really easy to do. It's kind of like going into a store and having no idea what you want to buy. So you just buy $20,000 worth of stuff and hope you ended up buying the right thing somehow, versus going in and be like, I need a Phillips head screwdriver. You go in, you pick up a Phillips head screwdriver, and $5 later, you got exactly what you need. It's like, wow, that was so much cheaper. It's like, yeah, because you know what you want. You know what you're going after. So when you are doing things that are just inherently harder, it's like, okay, it's harder, but why? And is that conducive to helping me achieve my objective? If it was, wow, I need to increase my stamina, like my original instructor did when he was like, I need you to kill this punching bag for 2 minutes and basically exhaust yourself doing it. That's exactly what we were going after. Is I need to be able to improve my stamina, so when I step into the ring, I'm not getting winded out so fast. And it worked great because we were directly challenging the fundamental objective that I needed in order to free spar better. Did I think it would do anything beyond that? No. Did it make me a better martial artist? Not aside from having better win-win sparring. Did it improve my side kicks and everything? Of course not. Didn't do any of that because I wasn't training for those things. I was just trying to kill the punching bag. That's all I was trying to do. And it worked great. So when you're using shorter rest periods and stuff, it's like, no, you're not burning anything more. You're not having any advantage of losing weight. You're not gaining more strength. There's all that sort of thing. Those objectives, the influence on those objectives is negligible at best. So no, don't think it's doing a whole heck of a lot for you. But a lot of times we think, well, if it's kicking my butt, then it's got to be doing something. Let me see if I'm missing one more question here. Get to this, folks. Sorry if I missed anybody. But I think we're probably at a good stopping point anyway, my friends. But anyway, this is the last one here for 2024. I will be coming back in 2025, of course, but I will be continuing this thing out. Good things coming for 2025 for Red Delta Project. The Beautiful Strength program, of course, will be released at some point. I'm still a bit of a work in progress, and that's going to take a lot of things here at RDP in a very positive, productive, and efficient direction. So I'm really excited by what this is going to be doing for the Red Delta Project, and it's going to help me put out a lot better content that's going to help you in a much more direct and effective way. So make sure, the usual, subscribe to the channels and everything like that, because a lot of great changes, a lot of improvements are coming along. Again, I still have the plans to produce the live follow-along workouts that will be here on the Red Delta Project YouTube channel, as well as a lot of more video tutorials about exercises and stuff. So things are going to be getting a lot clearer, a lot sharper, and a lot more helpful for you here in 2025. So hope you have a very good new year. Stay strong. Don't do anything that's going to compromise your strength. Don't do anything that's going to be like a lot of detrimental stuff. A lot of times around New Year, people start to forsake habits and they start to really let things go by the wayside. They're like, oh, I'll pick it up in the new year and stuff like that. If you want to make changes happen, make it happen now. Just start. Just start a little ways, small steps, get the ball rolling right away, and you'll be surprised at how much further you'll be even come New Year's Day. So thank you very much, everybody, for all of your support, all of your ability. I really do appreciate it. And I will talk to you folks next year. Till then, be fit and live free.